I've been asked a lot. I've been told a lot that the Bible has been corrupted. What proof do you have that the Bible isn't corrupted, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and like Greek manuscripts?
When they tell me corrupted, why is it corrupted? What do you mean by corruption?
They say that like the Catholic Church changed the words of the Bible.
And how do they know the Bible has been changed if they don't know what the originals read?
They say that we don't know the original, and so how do we know?
How do you know it's been changed?
Because I think it's more so their beliefs. Is there any proof that it hasn't been
Brother,
changed?
that's what I'm saying. They're making an assertion. For them to say it's been changed means they know what the original said for them to know the changes. So how do you know it's been changed? You say you don't know what they originally read. So how do you know it's been changed?
I think people go off of feelings. They just believe it.
And if they say, well, there are variations, say, well, there's a problem. If you go by variations, any book prior to the printing press, whether medieval literature or antiquity, any and every book that has more than one copy has variations, because copyists do not copy the same way, nor do they make the same mistakes. So if you're going by variations, that's true of any book and every book of antiquity and medieval period prior to the printing press. No serious historian would question, let's say, the writings of, let's say, Homer or Caesar's Gallics of War, whatever it is, just because there are variations. Because they know prior to the printing press, when things are copied by hand, there'll be variations. Now, the lesser copies you have of a book, the harder it is to then ascertain what the original wording is. What do I mean? If I have only 2 copies of an ancient work, those 2 copies won't be sufficient for me to know in every exact place what the original said. That doesn't mean that I can't get an idea of what is originally written, because then I will look at how much agreement there is between the 2 copies. But when you have only 2 copies, that's not sufficient to be able to ascertain the original, because the more copies you have, the greater likelihood you'll have at arriving at the original wording. This is, again, something that any textual critic will tell you. So if I have only 2 copies of, let's say, Homer's Iliad, when I look at the 2, I can ascertain what the exemplar used says. So I say, okay, well, here's pretty much what Homer's Iliad said, pretty much. But because I only have 2, I really can't tell in every single place with absolute certainty what the original said, because I have too few copies to work with. But if I have over 5,000 copies of the individual books of the New Testament written in Greek and nearly 10,000 in Latin, and then I have thousands of copies in other versions, not only do I have a wealth of manuscript evidence for the books of the Bible, now I have an embarrassing amount of manuscripts from different periods of history where I can reconstruct the original with at least 98 to 99% accuracy. And that's the state of the New Testament.
Right.
In a nutshell, the more copies you have, the greater likelihood you have at arriving at the original. Why? Because more copies means that the original wording of the original autograph will be there in the multiple copies. So if I have 100 copies and I look at the 100 and 90% of the copies read a certain way in a certain verse, that gives me confidence this is what the original said. So you have 100 copies, right? And let's say John 1:1. In 95 of those copies, John 1:1 all reads this way. 5 read a different way. Now I have a high volume of evidence to lead me to confidently tell you, well, this is what it said, because of the mass number of copies and the high agreement of the majority of those copies. Right. So with the Bible, you have nearly, let me be more cautious, over 25,000 copies of the books of the Bible in Greek, in Latin, in Sahidic Coptic, in Armenian, in Syriac. There is no doubt to any serious historian or textual critic that we have the Bible essentially preserved so that the original wordings of the original autographs preserved, hasn't been lost, and in your critical Greek apparatuses, you have up to 99% of the original wording reconstructed. That's a fact.
So because so many people have written the same doctrinal stuff, that proves that it has been corrupted.
For example, if I pick up a copy of John from the 2nd century, and I pick up a copy of John in the 6th century, and I pick up a copy of John 9th century, I look at it, and they're substantially the same. In other words, apart from the variations, because copyists make mistakes, I'm going to get the same message and essentially the same wording, and I'll be able to ascertain what the original says, because they're going to agree in a higher level of agreement than they disagree. That's just the fact of the textual manuscripts.
Right. People choose to accept that or not.
So if they don't want to accept it, say, okay, you're going to have to be skeptical of everything, because this is not a statement of faith, it's a statement of fact. Even skeptical, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say anti-Christian. I would call him an anti-Christian, but he wouldn't call himself anti-Christian. Even a skeptical scholar like Bart Ehrman, who's an agnostic/atheist, will tell you that when it comes to the New Testament, we pretty much have what they originally wrote, and none of the variant readings call into question any core doctrine of the Christian faith, because no core doctrine of the Christian faith is based on of one verse. And he basically says, if he were to hammer out a Greek New Testament in order to get at the original wording, he would be able to reconstruct at least over 94% of the original wording of the New Testament books. And I'm being very cautious saying over 94%. It's even higher than that. So even Bart Ehrman, who is no friend of Christianity, who became famous for writing a book sensationalizing the variant readings, he basically says, we basically have what they wrote, and the variant readings do not call into question any core cardinal doctrine of the Christian faith. And we're able to reconstruct the original Greek New Testament by analyzing the manuscripts, at least over 94% of the original. You can't ask for anything better than that. Now, I'm being cautious saying 94%. It's more like 97%, because he was asked if him and his mentor, Bruce Metzger, was considered one of the leading scholars of the Greek New Testament text. If he and his mentor sat in a room to hammer out the original wording of the Greek New Testament, they would be in agreement about 97% after assessing the mass copies of the Greek New Testament. That is amazing.
So is the other percentage that isn't 100%, is that like just like lost in translation, basically? Or is it like...
Well, yeah. What you have, for example, let's say you have 3% variation that's uncertain. What that means is the original wording is there, but they're not absolutely certain which of the variant is the original. But it's there. I'll give you just one example. John 1:18. Let's look at John 1:18. We have the oldest extant copies of John 1:18 from around the 3rd century. It's papyrus number 66. And papyrus number 75, P66, P75, and it reads, Monogenes Theos, only begotten God, or one and only, who is God. And we have that reading in Vaticanus. Other manuscripts read, Monogenes Huios, only begotten Son. So now you have these two readings. One of them is original. Which one is the original? Well, there are scholars who debate that it's only begotten God or one and only who is God. Yeah. Others say no, it's only begotten Son. But the point is, it's there, it's not lost. The issue is, which of them is the original? Which is the reading that John originally wrote? So this is the kind of variation we have, and that the original is there in one of the variants. In some cases, they don't know with absolute certainty which of the variants would have been what the author originally wrote down, but it's there. And if you say only begotten Son, only begotten God, that does not change the theology of John, because in the same John, he calls Christ only begotten and he calls him God. For example, in John 3:16, the word monogenes is used of Jesus. He's called the monogenes, Son of God. John 3:16, John 3:18, John 1:14, monogenes. And then John 1:1, he's called God, Theos. And in John 20:28, there Thomas says, my Lord and my God. So point being, both the word monogenes and the word theos is used of Jesus elsewhere in John, as is the word son we use. So even if you have a variant reading John 1:18, it doesn't change the identity of Christ. He is monogenes, one and only, or only begotten. He is theos, God, and he is huios, son. These are the nature of the variant readings. Don't let them tell you otherwise.
Yes. This might be something that a question that I didn't think about it much. So Jesus is suffering right up until the cross where he was killed for our sins.
Jesus suffering up until the cross where he was killed. Okay.
Yes, like his beating, his where people
Okay.
slapped him and all the other stuff. Was that also part of the plan of salvation, or was that a
Oh,
human element?
no, that caught God by surprise when he got beat and whipped. Like, wow, I wasn't planning this.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant, was it a human thing that God knew, or was it necessary for salvation in
I have
some
no
way?
idea what you mean. Well, a human thing that God knew, and was it necessary? So, if it wasn't necessary for salvation, so God allowed it to happen, even though it's not necessary and crucial for salvation.
In a way that God allows all the other evil to happen.
So, why would God need to allow something unnecessary to happen to the Son? Why not just have him go straight to the cross?
Yes, that's what I was wondering actually.
Well, the question is to answer it. So God could have sovereignly worked it where Jesus just goes straight to the cross, right?
Yes.
So the fact that he didn't go straight to the cross means what exactly?
That human free will played a part in it, and God allowed it for
Because
Jesus
it
to
was not
suffer.
necessary, right? Because it was unnecessary, and so God just allowed it to happen because it was not necessary, though.
Yes. No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Complex issue for me.
No, it's
Maybe
not
I'm just dumb.
complex because you just said if it's not a necessary component of God's plan for salvation, then Jesus would have went straight to the cross, right?
Um,
So did God
yes.
force people to kill Jesus on the cross? Because if I use your logic, that means that was something God forced them to do. There was no free will in that.
No, God didn't force anyone to kill Jesus.
So in that free will act of them killing Jesus on the cross, was that necessary component of salvation?
Yes, because Jesus dies for our sins.
Okay, so it says, by his wounds you are healed.
Hmm.
That also says that. So now, could God have Jesus go straight to the cross if his beating, his whipping, his spitting, the insult was not also a essential component part of salvation?
No.
So he couldn't have gone straight to the cross without him having to be beaten and whipped and spit on if those elements were not a necessary component of salvation?
If they were necessary, then no.
No, what?
I mean, I didn't, for what I know is Jesus' death was necessary, but I didn't know anything about Jesus' suffering, if it was necessary or not. So
So
if
what
it
I'm
was
asking you,
necessary, then yes.
okay, that's what I'm saying. If God didn't want the beatings and the whipping and the spitting, because that's not an essential element to bring about salvation, redemption,
Mhm.
because all it takes is for Christ to die on the cross. In point of fact, if it's just his death, why even death on a cross? Why not just have him die?
Yeah, I, I, I don't know.
You don't know.
No, I know his death
If,
on the
that,
cross because it was,
if all it is death, all it is death,
yeah.
then why not just have him die? Why even the crucifixion?
Because of the prophecies in the Old Testament, how it's
But that
foretold.
doesn't make sense, because the same prophecies also talk about him being beaten beyond human semblance. So you're not making sense, because the prophecies are either things because God knew the humans would do, but were not
Yeah.
essential to salvation, or these are prophecies showing you all the essential aspects of salvation that God had determined without overriding free will, which means that even the beating and the whipping and the spitting, the insult is all part of that program,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yes. Yes. Can
So,
you tell me about some passages that speak
like
about
Isaiah 52, verses 13 and 53, verse 12,
okay.
the entire section what talks about he was marred beyond human semblance, meaning he was beaten so badly he didn't even look human, and we turn our faces away from him because he had no majesty or comeliness that would make us desire him. Was that all part of God's program, that people would be repulsed at him and turn away from him and insult him and ridicule him, like in Psalm 22,
Hmm. Okay.
wagging their head and insulting him? You who trust in the Lord, let God deliver him because he trusts in him. So if it's prophesied, what does that mean exactly?
Um, if it's prophesied, then God knew that that's going to happen.
Only knew, or was that part of God's program to bring about redemption?
Uh, Also that, but that's what I was wondering in the beginning. Was it just knowing, or was it part of the plan? Um, so
So when
now,
I asked you the questions, did you get the answer finally? Because if I follow your logic, it's only his death. Why even have him killed on a cross? Why not just have him die?
yeah, yeah, I get it now.
To show you the consequence of sin, sin doesn't just bring about death, it brings pain, misery, and anguish, brokenness, and suffering physically, emotionally, psychologically,
Mm, yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's not just death. The effects of sin, it brings pain, suffering, misery, anguish, emotionally, psychologically, and physically.
yes,
So that's all part of redemption.
yes.
Redeem us from the suffering that sin brought about. But sin didn't just bring physical death, it didn't just bring physical pain, it brought emotional, psychological anguish, pain, suffering. So this is all part of the salvation process that Christ underwent.
hmm yeah.
Why is there depression? Why is there sadness? Why is there anguish? Did God create the world to be in anguish and sadness and depression?
No, no,
Or
of
is
course.
that the result of sin?
That's absolutely the result of sin.
So Christ came to redeem us from all those effects, right? And
Yes,
he bore all of that in his body, right?
yes,
Hence his anguish in the Garden of Gethsemane,
yeah. I can picture that now as I recently watched The Chosen.
right?
Yeah,
This is all part of the effects of sin. The emotional, psychological anguish, right? The sadness, the dread, the depression, as well as the physical pain that sin brings upon humans. And
yes,
that's what Christ did. So when you tell me, is it essential? How can it not be essential when your pain and your misery and your suffering and your anguish is all the result of sin? And he came to redeem you from all of it.
yes. I believe I was just looking at its surface level when I
Yes.
learned that the wages of sin are death. I wasn't
And
looking
even
at
what
the
does that mean to
suffering
redeem?
part.
The wages of sin, death, that means you're going to be cut off from the source of joy, peace, love, and happiness, because it says, in your presence are eternal pleasures.
Yes.
So what happens when you're cut off from God? What what happens when you're cut off from the source of peace, joy, love, and pleasures?
You will not have any of those.
Misery, sadness, depression, anguish.
Yes.
Right? That's all the effects of sin.
All right. Thank you.
Did I help you understand now, my brother?
Yes. Yes.
Read Psalm 22 and Isaiah 52, verses 13, all the way to 53, verse 12.
Okay.
It says, He bore our illnesses, our diseases, our sicknesses in his body. That's Isaiah 53. Why do you think when Jesus healed people of their illnesses, it was fulfilling Isaiah 53?
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. Let
Yeah.
me show. But can you keep a secret?
Yes.
So can I. Here you go. Right here. Matthew 8, 14 to 17. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. So there's an illness. Now, why do people get ill? Why do people have fevers?
Because of sin.
Okay. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. She got up and began to wait on him. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove them out. Why do demons torment and oppress people?
Because of sin.
And who instigated Christ being killed on the cross? Satan. And he drove out the spirits with the word and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So he went around. Now, why did he touch her?
To
Because
heal.
he's bearing her disease in his body. By touching her, he's carrying her disease. Because the moment the disease touches his body, it's destroyed.
Yes.
Why did he touch the leprous man? He goes, if you're willing, I can be cleansed. He goes, I am. And he touched him and he was cleansed. Because when he touches the leprosy, he is carrying, bearing the illness in his body. But once illness touches his body, it's destroyed instantaneously.
Yes. It's the power of God.
The power of Jesus Christ, who's God in the flesh, exactly. So, yes, this is all part of the salvation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank the Lord for what he did for us. So keep praying for me that he heals me, because I need a lot of healing.
Yes.
It's clear
I
now,
will,
right?
brother. Me too. I also need healing. Thank you.
He will. He loves you. So I hope it's clear now. You got it?
Yes. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bless you, brother. Peace.